Hey, this is Ish, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about why INFPs typically tend to hit their prime a little bit later in life compared to earlier. So if you're a younger INFP watching this, you might have felt that you don't typically fit in with society or that you're not, as more accomplished than your peers at this present moment, and you might be beating yourself up. But just understand for INFPs, we tend to mature a bit slower at a slower rate, but typically what happens is that later in life, it all comes together and we really just shoot up. So I'm going to be describing that. So I'll be going over our cognitive functions first and how that kind of contributes to us not hitting our prime a bit later on. And then I will be giving you an example of a famous INFP that you might know who hit it big a bit later on. So our first cognitive function, or most dominant function, is introverted feeling. And this is related to looking inwards, just to see how we feel about certain issues. And this is kind of like a lens or perspective where we filter all our life experiences and we compare that to how we feel on the inside. So everything is very subjective to us. Now, when this side is healthy, an INFP with a strong sense of introverted feeling seems very full of him or herself. They're very self-assured. They know what they want. And they have a nice quality of individuality, and they're their own person. But with the younger INFPs, they haven't developed that yet because they're still figuring out where they want to be, who they are, what things they might like to do for a career, who they like to hang out with, what places they like to go. So they're still in the process of figuring things out. So they don't feel fully confident and comfortable with themselves in embodying what they like. So this does take some time of exploration. And this is where their secondary function of extroverted intuition comes in. So this, for INFPs, is the function that likes to look outside and look for different possibilities and ideas and see what you can do from those ideas. And this function is pretty energizing because it's always looking at different opportunities and different things you can do and see how you could do this thing, and then that could branch to this, and you can connect to different opportunities, and it's like a web of thinking where you're just jumping from one possibility to the next. So it's really the function that's responsible for exploration. And this does take some time to develop that wisdom, because for INFPs, we develop wisdom through trying out different things and then relating it back to our own experiences using our introverted feeling. So it does take some time for us to see what worked, what didn't work, and then explore. Unlike other types that, like for example, an ISTJ would rather look into the existing past and look at metrics and see what worked before and then try to hone in on that. For the INFP, it's a bit different where we like to look at ideas and see how that could work. And it's through our execution of those ideas, we can now see what works and what doesn't work. So it's more idea focused than working on systems. But this also contributes to something greater. And that's the ability to be more of a sage figure or a mentor, because these concepts are highly related to ideas and personality and subjective thinking. So it's all personal. And an INFP will be able to convey those life experiences to other people because they so much understand those qualities. So that's a great quality. And this does take some time to develop and explore. And every failure amounts to something bigger, because in the way that the extroverted intuition thinks is in webs or patterns or big picture thinking. So even though you failed over here, a couple steps down, you can see how that failed opportunity can now branch into something else. So not all failures are just failures in the end, but actually failures can be turned into something greater and can be converted to something greater through life experience. The third function, or tertiary function, is introverted sensing. And this is organizing data from our five senses from a model of the past. So it's past-based focused. And for the INFP, we tend to be lacking in this quality until a bit later on. So in the unhealthy ways that we use introverted sensing is that we fall into routines and past-based things that work for us, but in an unhealthy way. So we tend to fall into unhealthy habits, unhealthy routines, and we also become pretty lazy, and that's pretty common. But over time, you learn which habits are good for us and which aren't. And then you will have that willpower you'll develop that willpower over time of building those very strong and positive habits. So over time, your life will slowly go from a trajectory of going downwards, or maybe even, just straight down the middle, to start to turn upwards, where we're slowly getting incremental progress upwards, because those habits, small habits, tend to expound and multiply over time. This is where you can slowly start to see where an INFP will start to take on some healthy behaviors and actions, and they won't really see the results of it until like much later, where it just bam hits them all at once because of that compounding effect, and that's typically how things work. And then our last function is extroverted thinking, and this is actually responsible for executing our ideas and tracking metrics and really focused on action. So this is what gets the action and produces results in the world. And for us, according to author Heidi Priebe, who has a really good book on INFPs, she says that for INFPs, we only develop this skill, this cognitive function, a bit later in life, so into your adulthood. And until then, this is our most inferior function, so we're not going to be able to really tap into this. But it takes some time to be able to, start to look at things objectively and focus on what we need to do and actually take action. And this kind of happened to me where, for most of my life, I was just pretty lazy, where I didn't do much. And then only recently, if you look at the last 2 years, I've started creating more videos. All of a sudden, I published like 2 books in a year, and I've started like producing a lot more results due to my extroverted thinking. And it's only, into my adulthood that I've been able to do this, where if you went to the past and saw me as a teenager, I wasn't doing much while my peers were getting good grades and they're going to good, schools and all that. I wasn't really up to par. But now, later on, I'm able to tap into this, and I'm actually expanding at a higher rate, if you could say so. So this will take time for INFPs to develop, our last function of extroverted thinking. So don't be discouraged if you're not tapping into this. It's not like we go to other personality types and be like, hey, why haven't you developed your other inferior function, right? We don't do that. So same way, you shouldn't beat yourself up over not developing your function yet. This will take some time. But small baby steps will work. You can start to look at different processes you can work on and looking at different metrics you can track to slowly build and develop over time. And just like tying this whole process up, if you look at a bigger picture thinking, like throughout your teens, you're like not sure what you want to do in life and you're kind of lost. So your introverted feeling is not like totally there. You're just unsure. You haven't had enough experiences to go off of. So you haven't formed a strong sense of self. And that actually hurts you as an INFP, because we're so into our how we feel about different things and our sense of self. And if it's not there, then that it stings a bit. And we haven't had those life experiences. But once we learn to tap into our extroverted intuition, we're like, okay, let me try this. I could do this, or I could do that. And you try out certain things, small things, and certain things work out, certain things don't work out. And you're like, okay, I'm still a bit lost. And this is where you hit your 20s and you're still exploring a bit, but you've now started to hone in on things, right? And it's maybe towards the middle or later part of your 20s and even your early 30s, where now you've honed in on exactly what you want. And this is where you can see INFPs really prosper and hit it big, because now they're like, okay, this is who I am, this is what I like, this is what I do. And that's actually really attractive to not only like yourself, but also for other people. They can look at you and be like, wow, this guy's or this girl has figured it out, right? Because you've taken the time to develop yourself, and that actually grows. And you may think as an INFP that your introverted feeling is like a curse or anything like that, but actually a lot of other types actually value our introverted feeling. So a lot of ENFJs that I hang out with, who lead with extroverted feeling, always look up to me and they're like, wow, I like how you know what you want, or I'm still figuring that out myself. I'm not sure what I want to do, but you as an INFP have figured it out. Obviously, they don't say I'm an INFP, but they say that to me, but not knowing that I'm an INFP. And then even like the ESTJs and ENTJs who have inferior FI, and in society we tend to look up to them, right? Just because they're like the producers of society. Even they are like, wow. They look at INFPs and they're like, wow, I like that you have figured yourself out. Because one thing that ESTJs and ENTJs struggle with is knowing what they want and how they feel about things, because that's their inferior function. Just like extroverted thinking is our inferior function. So introverted feeling is very powerful, and it is a good thing. And usually with a lot of INFPs that do pretty well in life, usually what tends to happen is that unless they make a conscious choice about it, they tend to just happen to be at the right place at the right time. I've talked about Kurt Cobain often on my channel, and he's a classic INFP. For him, like obviously his work was great, but he just happened to be in the Seattle scene at the right time, right when grunge was taking off. So obviously he hit it big. But I'll give you another example, like Johnny Depp, for example. He never thought of being an actor, right? And he was actually a touring musician, and he was just like playing music and enjoying the world. And then one day he was like, oh, let me try acting out, and he ended up hitting it big. But for a lot of other INFPs, it does take some time for exploration, and then once you've kind of figured it out as an INFP, you tend to skyrocket. So I'll give you an example. Vincent van Gogh, the Dutch painter, is a perfect example of this. So I actually read his 900-page biography a while ago, and in this book, they went over his like whole life story and how when he's younger he thought he would be like a store curator. That didn't work out. He thought he would be a writer. That didn't work out. He thought he would help his brother out. That didn't work. And doing like working in a different shop, that didn't work out for him. Then he was like, okay, let me try being a minister at a church. That also didn't work out for him. So he basically went through his adult life trying and failing at everything. And then he even tried art at the very end towards his life. And he even was really bad at that too. And if you actually look at his old drawings, they're actually absolutely terrible. But he persisted with it. And over time, he actually had a lot of his paintings, like the Starry Night that you've probably seen, hit it big. Because, like I mentioned, he was able to take all those experiences and that slowly built up to something bigger. So he's able to accumulate all those references in the past. And a lot of the things that he experiences, like sorrow, separation from his family, alienation, he was able to take all those elements and combine that into his art. So he was able to take those past experiences and that actually was able to contribute to something bigger. So like I mentioned, he was using his extroverted intuition, which is looking at things like in a web. And one failure might seem like it's a end of the world, but it actually contributes to something greater. So it's part of a bigger picture. So advice for you as an INFP is that keep going, try different things out. And if things don't work out, you can always use it at a different time. For me, for example, when I first started my career, I thought I would be a UX designer. So working on websites and all that. But for me personally, I just felt that the job was a bit too, too isolating. Like I wasn't talking to anyone. I was just in front of a computer all day. So I just wanted just a bit more social interaction because I like helping others, right? And then I ended up changing jobs. And then I went to sales and I sucked at that. So then I went to recruiting. So now in my recruiting job, I'm doing like amazing because it's just the right amount of connecting with others, but also doing other like admin stuff. But the whole point of this was I was able to take my experience. You might have said, okay, why did I even do UX design? That was probably a failure. Well, no, not exactly, because I'm now able to recruit people who are in the tech field. I have that knowledge in the technology industry. But also when I make thumbnails for these videos, if I make my website, if I'm doing any kind of visual stuff, I can actually take my experiences that I learned in my first job and apply that here. Okay, well, what about my sales job, right? It seems like the worst job ever for me as an INFP. Well, no, not exactly, because I've learned how to market myself in certain ways. I know how to handle rejection because you're getting rejected a lot. So I learned all these elements and I'm able to use that and produce more things. So it's all about taking past experiences and making it work for you. Anyways, this video's gone on pretty long, but hopefully you found this helpful. Thanks.